Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, which is focused on back to the office and adapting to change. So we're joined today by Niamh Hannah and also my colleague Dee France from CA Support and Thrive. So as we are all well aware, the last 2 years have brought unprecedented change, and that is continuing now as we transition and navigate our, I suppose, move back to working in offices once again, and for many managing hybrid working models. And this is something we as an institute and members department and CA Support are very aware of, and that's why we've come together today to bring you this webinar that is designed to support members, student and staff alike. And Dee, within CA Support and Thrive, has seen an increase in the number of requests and calls coming through for support. So we decided to collaborate to bring this webinar to you, but there are also a range of other supports that are being offered. So this is just one of those interventions and supports. So I'm going to hand you over now to Dee, who will just take you through briefly some of the other supports and interventions that are being offered by the Institute. Over to you, Dee.
Thanks so much, Karen. Yeah, it's really great to be able to do this collaboration, because I think when you do engage with the Institute, whether that's through member support or member experience, or through ourselves through Thrive, or if you're looking for financial assistance through CA Support, there is an awful lot of support available to you. And I think coming along to a webinar like this, going back to the office, it has lots of challenges. There's, you know, a lot of bumps along that road, and it's great to have someone like me who's a real expert in this area to help us deal with the stressors and what's going on for us emotionally. And if you come away, or if you kind of something piques your interest here, or you're kind of triggered, let's say, there is a lot of support. So just get in contact with Thrive. There's one-to-one listening service. We have a whole wellbeing hub there with all of the other events and up and coming webinars available. Tons of content that we're refreshing all the time as well on all of these various issues that we're all encountering. And it's a bit of a community as well. So you can kind of join these webinars. You're talking to like-minded people that are going through exactly the same issues as each other. And, you know, it's just about kind of that peer-to-peer support as well, which is really instrumental in the Institute. It's a really a great kind of part of being a member of a professional body such as the Institute. So I'll hand you back over to Karen now, and then look forward to hearing from Niamh later. Thanks.
Thanks, Dee. Great. So as we said, obviously we're all in that process of transitioning back to the office, and that again is another significant change that we're dealing with. So whether it's change in terms of your working environment, you know, change of surroundings, meeting with people face to face again, and this can obviously bring a range of anxieties and stress for people, whether that's, you know, I suppose just a change in terms of your working day, or anxieties related to COVID, and just even getting used to, you know, managing hybrid meetings and diaries. I know that's something I've been struggling and wrestling with myself in terms of diary coordination. So Niamh is joining us today to take us through some of the strategies and some practical tips and advice that we can use within our own working lives and personal lives, and indeed on a day-to-day basis. And Niamh is coming to us with a huge array of experience in this space. She's a chartered counselling psychologist with over 22 years experience, and she's also an accredited coach. And that's when I met you, Niamh, that was one of the things I really liked about your background, was that, you know, I suppose that the psychology background combined with the coaching experience and methodologies. And obviously you've worked with a huge range of clients such as KPMG, UCD, Irish Life. So there's that business context to it as well. So we're delighted to have you join us today. So over to you, and I'm looking forward to learning some tips and advice as myself actually too. So over to you.
Thanks so much, Karen, and thanks to Chartered Accountants and to Thrive for inviting me to speak today. And welcome to everybody who has joined us here this morning, this afternoon now. So I'm just going to share my screen here for you, so we have some slides and get started. So today we're just focusing on the whole theme of adapting to change. Change has been not just constant, but relentless over the last 2 years, really. And there's an awful lot happening right now as well. And people are constantly having to adapt. And there's a lot of exhaustion because of that too. As Karen mentioned, there's a little bit about my background and the kind of companies I worked with, say, for example, over the last year. I also have online group programs. My Looking After Leaders program is run in-house. It's a resilience program. And then the Core Connected Leader program is a group of female leaders that I run online. So feel free to connect me on LinkedIn or I'm also on Facebook and Insta, or take a look at the website. So today we want to look at, I suppose, first of all, really acknowledging everything that's going on for people as they're, moving into that transition of coming back to the office some of the time anyway, and understanding normal reactions to change, because we all deal with change differently. It's also helpful, I think, to look at the importance of routine and boundaries. Boundaries are something that we lost completely when we went to work from home, and we got into a lot of bad habits very quickly. So I think this is an opportunity now for us to go in with our eyes a little bit more wide open and kind of prevent ourselves getting into bad habits. So I want to look shortly at understanding stress and knowing the signs. So for both for you and for the people around you and the people you care about, being able to recognize your stress symptoms. I would think of it as like little red flags that we need to watch out for before things get too bad, because very often people don't recognize that they're stressed and overwhelmed until they hit a wall and they're out sick. And I want to give you some practical little tools that you can walk away with, that you can use anytime, anywhere, to calm yourself and soothe yourself and kind of restore a sense of balance and equilibrium, regardless of where you are. And these are both little practices that don't take chunks of time out of your day. So if, just on a practical side, if you have questions as I'm speaking, just pop them into the Q&A and I'll take a look at that later and answer all the questions, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of discussion time at the end. So yeah, feel free to pop them in and I'll come to them. So when we look at change, there's an illusion that you can manage change by controlling the world around you. And in fact, very often when there's high anxiety, what we try and do is control things that's to bring down our anxiety. But that's an illusion, because really, change is better managed from within rather than trying to control everything outside and trying to micromanage everything that goes on, because we don't have control over everything that happens. We certainly didn't have control over COVID, Brexit before that, and now the war in Ukraine. And so we're being, I suppose, bombarded with bad news. There's constantly things happening. It's been relentless now, going on, probably 4 years, but Brexit a couple of years before COVID. It was still going on when COVID struck. COVID is still going on. And now we have this war situation that is it's having a huge impact, I think, on everybody. So when we look at change and how we react to change as human beings, we have different reactions. And of course, if I create the change, I'm going to react to it differently and be more in favor of it than if it happens to me. So that sense of control is important there. So according to this research, there are maybe 4 main types of reaction to change, kind of common but distinct behavior reactions. So the first group of people are people who thrive on change. So these tend to be quite direct, results-oriented people. They embrace decisions and change. They're often the people who come into an organization and see what changes need to be made, and they're very often instigating the change. So yeah, they like change. They move quickly. They adapt quickly with change. Then there are a category of people who maybe just aren't so bothered by change. They're not necessarily going to be driving it, but they're, excuse me, they tend to be quite optimistic, and their enthusiasm and creative solutions to handling change keep others motivated during all of this, constant flux. So we, as you'll see by the 4 types, there's no type that's like good or bad. We need all 4 types probably, and you will most likely have all 4 types within any team or any group and organization. So these optimists tend to bring others along because they are not going to be stressed and having a stress reaction to the change. They'll go along with it. Then you have people who resist change and they need time to prepare. So particularly if there's any anxiety, people like to know what's happening and they need to have good warning and they need to kind of get their head around it. And if they can be given those opportunities and if it makes sense to them, they'll come around once they've had that time to prepare. So these people tend to be quite steady decision makers. They don't like to be rushed. And they may appear on the surface to put up with change. So you do have to be careful that, and this is why change management is such a huge area within organizations, because if somebody is kind of on the surface putting up with change, but inside they're resisting, that can create issues within a team or organization, because that resistance will be felt, and it may stir up the pot for others. So you have to make sure that everybody's on board. So when we look at organizational change, you know, there's of course time to plan with this. When we're looking now at the type of organization change we're talking about today is that the new hybrid working transition. There's been time to plan, but at the same time, there's a lot of unknowns. And you know, with the COVID situation constantly changing, the people making the decisions and running the organizations don't necessarily know any more than you or I do. So it's, you know, there's still that constant sense of change happening. And then finally, there are people who are concerned with the effects of change. So these people tend to be more cautious. They tend to be very careful about things. They don't want change to happen just for the sake of it. They want to make sure that if decisions have been made around change, that they've been well thought out. And that, you know, standards will be maintained regardless of those changes. So, so again, you can see how we need all those types. So maybe as I'm reading through those, you might be identifying, you know, one or two that you most resonate with. Which ones are you? Which describes you? And you're possibly recognizing people in your team as well. Such and such a person is definitely the first or the last or whatever it might be. So just thought it might be helpful to kind of understand how do people react differently to change, and how there's often good reason why they react differently maybe than you do. So when we look at where we're at now, it's very much a transition phase. And I think if you think of it in those terms and reframe it for yourself as a transition phase, then that might help you to kind of move through this. Because I think we have often a lot of expectations that get in our way. You've worked in the office before, full-time, probably, more than likely pre-COVID. You've worked pretty much full-time at home, working from home through a lot of COVID. You've possibly came back into the office last, I think, September. Some people started returning to the office, September, October, and then were quickly asked to go back home again by the government because the numbers started to rise. So this new phase is really a time of change and a time of transition. Some people have been working from home for, you know, the best part of those 2 years. Others may have been coming into a very quiet and empty office. Others have been onboarded, you know, online, and may never have been physically in their new office. They might not even know their way around. So just keep that in mind as well. Just because somebody has been with the organization for 18 or 20 months now doesn't mean they know their way around when they come into the office. They don't even know where the toilets or the canteen are. So keeping that in mind, different people are coping with different things here. But really, these hybrid arrangements are new to all, and they're varying from one company to another. And I'm speaking to different organizations and finding out what the norms are, and there's different expectations. And for everybody, it's really a trial period. You know, it's trying out something new. And each organization has had to try and put together a set of expectations, a set of norms, and they're going to have to be reviewed, you know, as you move through the first 6 months, first year in this arrangement, what's working, what's not. Things need to be reviewed. So it's good to remember that a lot of this, it's all change, and a lot of this can be out of our comfort zone, particularly at the beginning. Okay, so if you've been working from home, at the beginning, that was out of the comfort zone for most people. And then it became your norm, it became your comfort zone. And actually, because we were working from home and because so much of the world was shut down to us, our comfort zones shrank. So things that you were comfortable doing, things that you were confident doing 2 years ago, maybe getting up in front of a group of people, real live people in a room, didn't take anything out of you 2 years ago, but now you've just been sitting in your own little room at home and it suddenly might feel very different. So just being aware that, the comfort zone may have shrunk. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to readjust. So first of all, you do need to stretch outside of that comfort zone, particularly if it has shrunk, because otherwise it just keeps shrinking and you lose confidence and lose your capacity. So the objective here is to kind of get used to doing things that you used to feel confident doing, but give yourself time and have some compassion and go easy on yourself, because don't expect it to all be back to normal in day one. So all of this will get easier as you get practice, really. That's all just practicing going back into the office, practicing, doing the things that you used to do, practice being on, like for a lot of people, even commuting on public transport is a scary thing, being in crowded places again. People are still avoiding that. And many of you might have health reasons to avoid those kind of situations and to have that extra layer of anxiety there for you. So there's a lot of different things that people are dealing with and grappling with, and it's not as simple as just get back into the office. The good news is that establishing a routine will help you to feel normal again. And what I would say is we have an opportunity here now, going in with our eyes wide open, to set good habits now for our new routine. So we fell into a lot of bad habits, overworking, long hours, not taking breaks, and not being able to switch off. And that resulted in a lot of burnout over the last few years. So let's be more aware and go in and maybe go in more consciously to this new way of working. Because really, we're trying to set up something for the future here. We're trying to set up a way of working that is more flexible, that is, more inclusive, that suits more people, and should be better for our health and for our well-being, going into the future. But we need to do that well. So be careful about just falling into old patterns or having really high expectations of yourself straight off. So when we look at routine and boundaries a little bit, I would say that, when we had to work from home, we lost a lot of our routine and our boundaries. It's probably a little bit easier, in fact, to have boundaries in place when you're leaving your home in the morning and going into the office, and leaving the office at the end of the day and going home. So there's two key boundaries there that are in place. There's the space boundary. First of all, you're working in a different space, so it's a little bit easier to have clear lines that, oh, this is my, when I get home, this is where I relax. And when I go to work, this is where I have to work and focus and switch on. So we have a clear switch on and switch off when you have that space boundary. There's also the time boundary, because it takes you some time to get from home to work. So you have that adjustment period. You have a little bit of wind down on your way home. And that helps as well. We missed that when we were working from home. You may have been, sitting here all day and then sitting at your kitchen table all day and then turn around and eat your dinner at the same kitchen table, and have your conversations with your family. Or for some of you, maybe you're working in your bedroom and that's also where you go to sleep at night. And suddenly you find that your head doesn't know the difference between, am I working here now, or is it sleepy time? And so it became quite difficult for a lot of people to sleep, to relax, to tune out of work. They might have felt switched on all the time. Plus, when we look back in the depths of those winters that we were on strict lockdown, there wasn't much else to do. So people often just, got back into emails in the evening, and again, poor boundaries. So that, if I was to underline one particular thing today, it would be around really being aware of your boundaries, going into the office, and creating clear boundaries. So even on your working from home days, it can help to pretend you're going to the office, to act as if you're going to the office. I've definitely talked to people who found it useful to pretend, to even create a little mini commute. So maybe walk around the block for 10 minutes as if you're walking to work. And again, in the evening, rather than just immediately just switching from laptop to kitchen, and having no kind of boundary in between, it can help to create the other thing, I suppose, is that, people have talked about when they take their break and they go down and the kitchen is still a mess, the breakfast stuff is still all over the place, there's laundry to be hung out or whatever, and you end up kind of going into that house cleaning mode on your work breaks and then going back up to the office. And so you haven't really taken a break at all. So again, part of acting as if you're on an office day means pretending that you're not there and you can't be there because you're at work, even though, like, I'm upstairs now, I'm at work, so I can't possibly be doing the laundry and the dishwasher and the cleaning and everything else while I'm at work. So again, just being conscious of those kind of things and being aware of, if you are doing that stuff, is it helping you? Is it calming you? Do you feel better? If so, keep going. Or is it impacting on you that you feel like you're just constantly going, always switched on, endless list of to-do things, in which case it's not helpful and you'd be better off just taking your cup of tea or coffee out to the back garden and ignoring the mess and sit in the sun for 10 minutes. If you tend to work flexi, or if you tend to work some evenings, make sure you have, again, creating a boundary, make sure you have an off time. And try to create rules for yourself, really, so that you never work past a certain time in the evening. So, for example, I'm working with a client at the minute who could end up doing a lot of work at night and end up working till midnight. And again, that just means that your brain finds it very difficult to switch off. It's going to take you longer to get to sleep. You're more likely to wake up in the wee hours of the morning and still be switched on and tired and grumpy the next day. So if you do need to do some work in the evenings, make sure you have a kind of an end by time. For example, never work past 10 p.m. so that you always have maybe an hour to wind down before you jump into your bed. So set your intentions. Because when we don't set intentions, we just get pulled in whatever direction by usually the things that shout the loudest, the fires that have to be put out and demand our attention, the loudest. So go in with a clear plan, go in with intentions, go in knowing what works for you and try to stick with that plan. Of course, we have to be flexible with change, but if you've set some intentions, you're more likely to stay on track. I'd really encourage you, if you do have a commute, on those days that you're going into the office, use that for your headspace. It's one of the things I missed. I had my clinic in Dundrum, and I also, would have done this in-house a few years ago, which meant I spent a lot of time on the M50, which I don't miss. What I did miss was that quiet time in the car, that kind of transition time, that commute. I realized my mum wasn't getting phone calls like she used to at all, because I used to do that in the car, but also friends, just, I'd have that extra time, the hour and coming home in the evening or the hour going in the morning, that, I could catch up on phone calls and connect with people. And I wasn't doing that when I was working from home constantly. So look at what you missed from your commute. Maybe it's your time to read your book or listen to a podcast, or do something nice for you. Okay, you're working long enough. So use your commute for you time. Make sure you take proper lunch breaks. These are all about boundaries and getting in good habits. And again, particularly if you're in a leadership position, it's important to model good behavior in the office because others are always watching. So take proper lunch breaks, get outside for fresh air. It isn't selfish. It'll actually help you to work better for your afternoon rather than trying to muddle through and ending to taking longer to doing the same amount of work. So definitely, beautiful day out there today. Get outside regularly. It's good for the head, and anything that is good for your state is good for your performance, because really the key to being effective and being able to perform and being able to, be creative and innovative and a good problem solver, all of those things depend on our head being in a good place. And so these boundaries will help you to keep your head in a good place, particularly as you're going through lots of change happening around you, lots of world news impacting negatively on you. If you have a routine and some boundaries, that keeps some safety there, keeps some predictability, keeps some level of stability in your life. And that can help you to feel normal, even when things going around you don't feel like they're normal at all. So some other tips would be just allowing yourself time to readjust. Lower your expectations and expect teething issues. Okay, this is new for your organization too. Nobody has this all worked out. Nobody is going to have the perfect plan that's going to suit everybody. So there are going to be teething issues. There are going to be things that crop up that maybe somebody didn't manage to think of or didn't anticipate. So, they will have to be learned from and responded to. And again, there'll have to be, flexibility and adaptability as we go. So give yourself time to adjust, and expect teething issues for yourself too. It's, maybe you underestimate the traffic one morning and you end up stressed out because you're getting in late. There's a lot of different bits and pieces here to just going back to the office. It's not as simple as we might think. So be proactive about your use of time. And that's the other thing, that when we're in the office, our time management is very different to when we're at home. And I know that some people are worried that they won't be as productive when they're back in the office, because we've got used to spending all our commute time at work, in when we're working from home. And suddenly now your workday is going to be shorter because you've got commute time, and maybe you have to drop kids off, or, there's all these other considerations. And when you get into the office, you've got people to talk to. So I think it's important to maybe reframe productivity. It's one thing, and it's great when you're working from home to be able to put the head down and just work. But there are other parts to our work and to our performance that are equally as important. Building those relationships, building those connections, that happens a lot easier in the office. And so rather than just focusing on one measure of productivity, I think it may help you to focus on, well, actually, I achieved, I talked to a couple of people today and reconnected, and was able to help somebody out, and I was able to answer a question for somebody else. And that's all part of our contribution to work. And that all adds to the overall performance and to the overall well-being of people around you as well as yourself. So it's not just one measure for productivity. And I think if you widen out your scope a little bit, you'll find that the office days are different than your working from home days, but there's a lot to be gained from both. So use your commute time wisely, and if possible, look back at your last 2 years working from home. What were the best aspects of that? What would you like to take from that working from home time? And what were the bits that you missed about being in the office? Now you have the opportunity to get the best out of both worlds. Maybe you plan your week so that the real kind of head down, focused work is done on your days at home, and the more interactive team engagement work is done on your days in the office. So you set your expectations differently. Maybe you possibly missed the aspect of being able to kind of turn around and say, help, I need some help, or I've just had an awful call, or whatever. Maybe you missed that. So again, this is the opportunity to get the best out of both worlds. And if you are just heading back to the office, and you're only starting really back, make sure you plan lots of support systems, whether that's the childcare, which we've lost over the last 2 years and have to go out and find again, help, cleaner, whatever kind of help that you need to make this easier on you. You possibly wore a lot of hats when you were in the home. Certainly there were times when, for people with kids were at home, you had to be parent, you had to be teacher, you had to be the cleaner because nobody could come in, you had to be everything, and you wore all those hats. It's time to release some of those hats. Lower your expectations. You can't do everything. You can't continue to wear all those hats while you return to the office and work from home and, still maintain some sanity. So get some support systems back into place. So again, if anybody's any questions, or feel free to lob them into the Q&A there. So just want to give you this little piece to get your brain spinning. E plus or equals O. The event and your reaction to it creates your outcome. Now, very often people think that E leads to O on its own. So this happened and that really made me upset. Or he said that and that really made me angry. Or she did this and that ruined my day. As if the event leads directly to the outcome. But if the event leads directly to the outcome, then we know that actually the same event should have the same outcome for everybody. But it doesn't. We all have different reactions. We all have different outcomes to our day. Why? Because of the or. So if you want anything in your life to change, the piece that you have most control over is your reaction. If you want to feel better, if you want to enjoy your well-being, if you want to be more productive and be able to perform well, that's the outcome. Then very often we don't have control over the event. Sometimes we have. There's things we can do to manage it differently. But with a lot of the world stuff that's going on and has been going on, we've no control over that. And all we can do is manage how we react to it. So your reaction includes your interpretation, the meaning that you give a situation, your beliefs about a situation, your attitude, your mindsets. All of those inner pieces really shape how you turn out and what happens for you. So you could have the same event in a workplace and you could have very different outcomes for different people depending on what they tell themselves in their own head about the situation. And that's the bit that we probably give least focus to, because most people, after 20 years of counseling and lots of coaching, most people who come to me spend 90% of their effort on the event. I'm trying to control the event, I'm trying to manage the event, I'm trying to change. The event could be another person. I'm trying to change another person, trying to make them change. And really our control, a lot of it comes back to how can I deal with this differently so I feel better, so I come out of this better. So this is really important and can be applied to any context, really, whatever's going on in your life. Okay, so at this point, I just want to do the first of our little self-calming exercises. And this is just a breathing exercise. We're all breathing all the time, but you may not be aware of it when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, when you're having an angry rant or any of those kind of negative high arousal emotional states. Your breathing changes. You're possibly breathing from up here, maybe holding your breath at times. And so just stopping a few times a day to take a few deep breaths can really help. And it's simple, but if you don't already have a breathing exercise, then I'd encourage you to give this one a try. So this particular one, 7-11 breathing, is clinically proven to help to reduce anxiety and release tension. And when we're starting to get stressed and overwhelmed and, that brain is spinning and there's 1,001 things going on and we can't see the wood from the trees, that means we're releasing stress hormones. And cortisol is one of those stress hormones. And as cortisol goes up, unfortunately, our intelligence starts to come down. We can't really think clearly. We're poor at decision making. So it takes us longer to do the same thing. So that would be the perfect opportunity to stop and take a few deep breaths. And that helps to lower your stress hormones and bring your nervous system back into balance. And then your brain can work again. Okay, so let's just do this together. All it is breathing in through the nose for about the count of 7 and breathing out in a slow, controlled way, as if through a little pinhole in the mouth. So very slow, controlled exhalation. Now, for the perfectionists among you, don't get too hung up on it being perfectly 7-11. You might end up breathing in for 5 and out for 7 or 8. That's absolutely fine. The main thing here is to breathe out for a little bit longer than you breathe in. And again, you don't go doing this all day or you will get dizzy, just for about 4 breaths at a time. So I'd just like to invite you to do this with me, to give it a go so you've tried it out. So start by maybe sitting a little bit more upright. Nobody could see you, so you should be safe enough to do this, but you can see me. So sitting upright so you can get some air into your lungs. And let's begin just by breathing out. Just blow out all the air in your belly. And breathing in through the nose. Feel your lungs expanding like a big balloon filling up, and then slowly exhaling. That balloon is getting smaller and smaller. And you feel your shoulders coming down even. Breathing in again. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And breathing out. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again. And just allow your breathing to come back to normal now. And I'd like you to bring awareness to how you're feeling. Notice, is there any difference? I always find after doing that little exercise, it's like things get quieter in my head and things just come down a couple of notches and you feel maybe just a little bit brighter or more relaxed or a little bit calmer. What I'd love is for you to get into the chat box, get those fingers typing and let me know, how do you feel after doing just that little exercise? It probably takes 30 seconds when you do it on your own. So get those fingers typing into the chat box and let me know, did you feel any different after it? Did anybody have any difficulty with it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know what's going on. So great, I'm seeing the first little chats coming in. Let me just look at this. So great, thank you. So I could definitely feel my shoulders dropping, feel calm, very relaxing, less tense. Brilliant. So, and likewise, if anybody had any difficulty with that, let me know and I might be able to help. So lots of people reporting that it helped you kind of come down, calm, slower the heart rate. Yeah, absolutely. Bring down the blood pressure. So there's always stuff happening in our body that we're just not aware of because we're living in our heads. We're like a little rat going around in a wheel the whole time. Woo, this is happening and that's happening, this other thing. And we're living in here and your body is probably staying quite still at the desk while you're busy running around in your head. And so it's really important to take time throughout your day to come out of that busy head, to stop that running around in the wheel and just take a few deep breaths. So lots of people saying relax, clears the head, helps you to focus, less overthinking. Absolutely. So it can bring you out of a negative state that quickly. And so now you have this simple little tool that you can do anytime, anywhere, at your desk, in the office, in the car, before screaming at kids, you know, depending on what's going on in your life. This can help you to just kind of rebalance and reconnect and find your calm, your inner calm. So that's the first of two little exercises. So just moving on now to stress. And you know, what is stress? And I suppose we're all familiar with stress. We all know what it feels like to a certain extent. So stress is defined often as a combination of physical, mental, and emotional reactions which result from a perceived worry or threat. And that word perceived is underlined because what I perceive to be stressful might be very different to what you perceive to be stressful. Not only that, but what I perceive to be stressful can actually change from one day to the next, or even from 1 minute to the next. So if you've had a bad night's sleep, for example, then you're going to perceive things to be more stressful than on a day when you've had a good sleep. So if you have young children, or if you've been up worrying about an elderly parent, for example, or somebody been sick, then the chances are that, you know, even waiting in a queue for lunch just seems more stressful. The smallest little things are probably getting on your wick. So our perception of stress changes. So it's less about, oh, that's a stressful job. And it's more about how you perceive it. Okay, so this is why it's so important to look after ourselves, because our perception of stress changes. When you're looking after yourself and you're feeling well, you cope better with things that other people might find stressful. There's such a thing as positive stress, and that's the idea that we actually work well when we've got the right amount of pressure. So if you think of, you know, if you've got nothing to do and you're bored, you kind of go into a negative stress. Whereas when you've got the right amount, you're maybe productive, you're feeling good, you're taking things off your list, you feel more confident, you're getting lots done. And so that's the positive stress zone, really. And that's where motivation and performance are boosted. And that's what we want our people to be in at work. We want to be in that positive stress zone. However, when you cross over the line and you start to feel overwhelmed and that you can't cope, you've really gone into negative stress then. And we all know what that feels like. And that's when the demands of the situation exceed our ability to cope. And so what happens there then is actually that our coping facility goes downhill. We've taken on too much and then we're doing everything less well. So again, it's in everybody's interest to stay in the positive zone rather than going into that negative stress zone. So again, I'm going to use the chat box for this. We're going to save the Q&A just for questions. And I see there's one there that I'll come to shortly. So getting into the chat box, I'd like you to get those fingers typing again. How do you know when you're stressed? What are your symptoms? What happens to you? What are the first clues to you that you're stressed or that you're overwhelmed? And we all have stress symptoms. I don't think there's anybody here that never gets stressed. And if there is, I'd love to learn from you. So don't be shy, get typing, get into the chat box and let me know what are your stress symptoms, because we find that we actually have a lot in common. So I'm just going to come out of this again just to see the chat box. Great. So can't concentrate. Yeah. So the head, it's hard to think clearly. Shortened breath, stomach upset. So a lot of people hold their stress in their stomach, and anxiety is often held there too. And we see even before leaving CERT, we see problems such as irritable bowel syndrome developing, and then more serious kind of digestive system issues happening if your stomach is where you hold your stress. My breath goes faster, my heart rate goes higher, anxiety, feels like there's too much happening at once, can't eat. I'm afraid that one never happens to me. I'm the opposite. My eating behavior is more likely to think, oh, I'm working really hard, I deserve more chocolate. But again, people who hold their stress in their stomach often find that they feel nauseous or that they can't digest the food. And then they might forget to eat, and actually then you've got no fuel in the system and you're getting run down and exhausted. Can't focus, mind starts racing, feel tightness in the neck and shoulders. That can often lead to migraines and headaches. Somebody else saying their shoulders get tight, not as talkative, so you might withdraw. You don't feel like making small talk. You don't have any sense of humor because that's taken a nosedive. Imposter syndrome, so feeling like a fraud, fearing that you're going to get caught out, very busy head, all that stuff going on. Heart rate faster. Great, you've got lots of entrants here. Thank you so much for typing in and sharing. Overwhelmed, hot, sick stomach, panic, can't think clearly, heart rate increasing, breathing rapidly, need to leave the situation. So kind of going into that panic. Breakout in hives, headaches. And so, yeah, if I'm stressed, how is everyone else? So as you can see here, everybody has so many people have entered here, lots of different symptoms, lots in common, lots of physical ones. So let's just look at that. We have, I suppose, it's probably 4 categories. First of all, the physical. Some of you have mentioned headaches, shoulder stress and tension. The stomach is a big one. Maybe hot hives, lots of different things going on there. Men are more likely to report to their GP with lower back pain rather than stress. So if you're a man, just being aware of that, or many of you maybe live with a man, and lower back pain can be a manifestation in the physical body of stress being held. And of course, our immune system, it takes a hit, and so we're more likely to catch the stuff that's going around. And particularly in COVID times, that's something we need to be very aware of. We can't afford to let our immune systems take a bang like that. Emotionally, some of you again have mentioned, your mood takes a dip. You might be, actually, not many mentioned irritability, but I'm guessing that most of you get more irritable. We get a short fuse, we get more cranky. It's often one of the first signs of stress. You're like, tetchy, kind of more reactive. Some people get more tearful, that feel like bursting into floods of tears. Others are just going to be angry. So, our emotions definitely take a hit and we're more reactive. Mentally then, and again, many of you have named it, that you can't think clearly. You might get brain fog, have difficulty making decisions, can't see the wood from the trees, get confused. So lots of different things. Really, your mind is not working at your peak when you're going into that negative stress zone. And behaviorally, your eating behaviors might change. Smokers tend to smoke more, drinkers tend to drink more. We tend to throw all the good stuff out the window. So diet, exercise, and sleep are the things that we really need to be looking after, and are the basics, really, the foundations of self-care are diet, exercise, and sleep. And yet those three things are often thrown out the window as soon as we're under any kind of stress or pressure. So we're way too busy and way too tired to do any exercise. We don't have anything in the fridge, so we'll just get a takeaway again, or you're just drinking cups of coffee to keep you going and not taking a proper break. And sleep, well, actually, you didn't mention sleep in I think in the chat, but sleep disturbance is really common even after one bad day. And I find there are three categories of sleeper. So I'm in the first category. My head lays down on the pillow and it's like, bing, the rat wakes up and starts running around in that wheel, and my head gets really busy and takes me a long time to wind down to get to sleep. My husband's in the second category. He's the one who could, snore within a minute of his head hitting the pillow. But this category of sleeper often wake up in the wee hours of the morning. So at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock, they might be looking at the watch going, oh, I'm exhausted and I've only got an hour left, I have to get up. And so their head is starting to wake up way too quickly in the morning. And the third category of sleeper is a person who could sleep for 14 hours solid if they were let, but they're still waking up exhausted. So you're not going into the right patterns of sleep. So there are some of the signs and symptoms. And the reason I spend time on those is because it's so important for you to recognize your signs and symptoms and take note and do something about it before things get worse. What lots of people do is they get sick or they have some of these symptoms and they can't wait just to get back to work, doing exactly what they were doing in the same way and not changing any habits and expecting a different result. And instead what happens is you get more serious warnings. You get worse things happening, physical and or mental illness often being the result. So listen to the little ones before, and hopefully you won't have to get the more serious warnings. So I like this one. You're busy with what you've said yes to. And in our modern day world, we wear busyness like a badge of honor. Oh, you're so busy, busy, busy. You're busy with what you said yes to. We make choices every minute of every day. So being conscious of what you're choosing and what are you being busy with, and what then is missing out in your life because of what you said yes to. So healthy habits. Have a think. If you were to take up one, even if you were to change, and I've been reading James Clear, Atomic Habits, if you were to make 1% improvement every day by maybe picking one habit that you try and build up, and it takes a long time to establish a habit. NASA would say it's 66 days now, at least, okay, to establish a habit. That's daily practice every day for 66 days before it's established. For most people, in any of these kind of things, you're going to fall out of practice, have to start to scratch again. It could take you a year to really establish a good habit. But look at your life and you're going back into this transition. What one little habit could you set up for yourself? Maybe for your commute time, maybe just about getting out for 10 minutes fresh air during your lunch break, something that you can do for you to help you transition back and mind your well-being as you're doing it. Lots of different ideas. Okay, so I'm just going to check in our chat box. Yeah, somebody's saying 66 days. Wow, that's the latest research. Morning ritual, somebody's saying yoga and breath work, 30 minutes make a massive difference. Absolutely. If you look at any of the kind of the highly successful leaders, they all have a good morning practice. It's something that took me a long time to establish. It took me a couple of years really to get into meditating every morning, but I do it now, my 5 days a week. I wouldn't let that drop because I know how hard it was to get it into practice, and it does benefit. So I like to get out for a walk first thing in the morning as well, before I start work. And I can do that when I'm working from home. Some days, not every day, depending on the time I start. But again, it's about kind of building up habits and building up, what works for you. I see there are questions there, but I'm going to do this little exercise first and then come to the questions. So this is our second little self-calming exercise. Some people don't like focusing on their breath, that when they focus on their breath, they start to panic and maybe it causes just more anxiety. And other people prefer this anyway. Again, it's another tool that you can do anytime, anywhere, without needing extra time in your day. You can just do it where you are. So all it is about switching your attention away from giving your attention to everything that's going on in your mind, all your thoughts, 60,000 of them a day, okay? Out of your mind into your senses. So let's do it. So just wherever you are today, I'd like you to switch your attention for the first few moments into vision. So take a look around you wherever you are. Notice colors, notice things, notice textures. See if you can spot something green. And even if there's mess around you, seeing if you can just look without hopping up into the head and analyzing. So there's no judgment, there's no analysis, you're just looking at what's in front of you, really focusing on what's in front of you. Moving now with your attention to sound and just listening for a few moments. Maybe it's really quiet where you are and you can almost hear your own breathing. Maybe it's really noisy. Maybe there are a lot of distractions in the background. And again, see if you can just listen and just notice the noises and sounds without having to criticize or wishing them away. They just are in this moment. They're just part of this moment. Moving on now by switching your attention into sensations in the body. You might begin by bringing your awareness down to your feet. Feeling the extra warmth or pressure wherever they're touching against the floor. Becoming aware of your toes. You could even give them a little wriggle. Becoming aware of your bum in the seat, back against the chair. Tuning in now to your breathing. Not just thinking about your breathing, but actually feeling the rise and fall of your chest or stomach with each breath in and each breath out. Just staying with that for a moment. And of course, the mind is still busy. The thoughts are still going to be racing around in there, but you just keep bringing your attention back to what's in front of you in this moment. And the other thing is that when we quieten down and we bring our attention inwards, it's often the aches and pains and the tiredness that shouts the loudest for our attention. So if that's happening for you, again, just noticing without judgment. It's like, oh, okay, so that's there. And what else do I notice? Moving on now to taste. Possibly nothing unless you're sneakily eating or drinking there in the background. And finally, just inhaling. Notice if there's any smell. Don't forget to exhale. So again, just noticing how you're doing. Notice if there's any difference in your body or in your mind state. And I'd like you to get typing into chat again and let me know, how did you get on with that exercise? Which do you prefer, the 7-11 or this 5 senses exercise, sometimes referred to as VAC-GO, V-A-K-G-O, you can see there. Did you have a preference for one or the other? Which are you more likely to practice? Do you have any questions about either of them? How do you feel after? So get typing into chat and let me know how you got on with this exercise. This one, again, you can do anytime, anywhere. So you could be sitting in the car and you just bring your attention to, your hands on the steering wheel, the vibration of the car, the sound of the traffic, the sky outside your window. We all take a shower every day. So be present in the shower instead of being at work when you're in the shower. Feel the water, smell the shampoo or the shower gel. So I'm going to race on because I'm just aware of time. I just want to let you know about a workshop that I have upcoming. It's on sale now. It's €27. It's coming up in April. You'll find that on my website or on any of my social media. It's about changing your story to release your limiting beliefs, really. So before you leave, I'd like you each to decide, what are you taking from today? What one thing? Don't take 10 things. Resolutions, they never last. But what one thing are you going to take? And I'm going to cut and paste, copy and paste this feedback form into the chat box as well. So I notice there are questions. Okay. I always find it really difficult to open up my chest and start panicking. Okay, so yes, if that happens to you when you're breathing, practice the 5 senses exercise instead. Take your focus away from your breath, focus on your feet on the floor, the safety of the moment, the smells, what you can see. So that would be my advice if you have any trouble there, when you focus on your breathing. Now, let me see, I'll just come out of the chair. I'm familiar with box breathing technique. So yeah, if you have a breathing technique already that's working for you, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The 7-11 breathing exercise is clinically proven, but again, if you already have an exercise that you're doing, go with what works for you. This is an offering in case you don't have them, because a lot of people don't have an exercise. So, you could try this as a new one if you want, but if you already have something, go with what you have. Somebody's saying, I often suffer from sleep disturbances, waking in the middle of the night in a panic when stressed or things on my mind during the day. What would I advise? So again, routine and boundaries that we talked about, taking time during the day to become aware of your state and even do that 7-11 breathing to kind of let go and blow out. Even as you're releasing, as you're exhaling, imagine that you're blowing out and releasing some of the stress or some of the problems or worries. Also, it helps to have a bedtime practice. So maybe doing some meditation or a progressive muscle relaxation. So I'm just going to put that into chat. So first of all,
thanks for that, Niamh.
I have the feedback form there. If you wouldn't mind taking a minute at some point to do that, if you just click on that. And the progressive muscle relaxation is clinically proven to help sleep, but it's not going to work the first time you try. It's something that takes practice, a little bit of consistency. If you can't access one that you like, there's plenty up for free on YouTube. Get in touch with me. I have one recorded as well.
That's great, Niamh. Thank you so much. Like, that was really insightful, just in terms of raising our awareness, and obviously some really good tips there. I do have one question that comes to mind for myself, and this is relevant for everybody as well. But obviously, as we go back into the office, like, just I suppose some tips around, maybe identifying kind of anxiety in others around us, and how we then support and help others around us as we all kind of I suppose manage the change and transition. Niamh.
Absolutely, great question. So those stress symptoms that everybody typed in, they're the common, I suppose, displays. And very often it can be that irritability, that somebody's a little bit more short-fused. And particularly if you know them and you know that this isn't really them, I would reach out and go, you don't seem quite yourself. So don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and just ask, is everything okay? Or how you cope and how you find and get back to work, what's going on with you? And that's why, I think we need to take the focus off just being productive little machines and actually, when we're in office, refocus on reconnecting. Because there's so much more to be gained from reconnecting and checking in with people in person. You can read the energy, you can pick up on little signs and cues. And sometimes, of course, we're going to miss it too. Sometimes we may not notice. It can be, so a lot of people tend to isolate themselves and withdraw a little bit, so they're less likely to join in at lunch or less likely to join in the banter because they're not feeling it. they may refuse to come into the office if they're really struggling. There may be kind of that, like school refusal, that anxiety of coming back in. So again, it's patiently responding to that and checking in what's really going on for the person. So yeah, but sometimes the stress signals are actually the things that we're more likely to kind of rub up against the wrong way. A person is more on edge. We're less pleasant to be around when we're stressed and anxious. And anger can often go hand in hand.
Indeed.
The two, there's a few A's that go hand in hand with anxiety: avoidance and anger. So, you know, if somebody's feeling very anxious, they're on tenterhooks, so they're going to be more reactive.
Indeed.
And also we tend to think, well, if this is making me anxious, if I just avoid that, then I won't be anxious. But actually, in the long term, that just grows anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the person needs help to, how can you take this in bite-sized chunks and do one little level at a time, get comfortable with that, and then stretch a little bit further out of the comfort zone, practice that. And so you might have to create a plan with somebody about how they
Brilliant. That's really, really very helpful. And like the rest of the tips today, really, really very practical and useful. So I'm just conscious of everybody's time. Just to say thank you so much to Niamh and to Dean. I'm delighted that we were able to collaborate across the members department and with CA Support and Thrive to bring this webinar to you today. If there's any other questions, feel free to email them on to us to CA Support, and we're happy to answer any questions and provide any support that we can. And just once again, Niamh, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for attending this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.